Have you ever felt like you weren't fully living your life for yourself? The job you show up to, the smile you practice, the silence you've learned to keep, the milestones you've reached, the choices you've made, they all look right on paper. But when you're alone, truly alone, do you feel like you're living a life that belongs to someone else? From the moment we are born, we are handed a script. Be polite, be responsible, be agreeable, and above all, be successful. You learn early on that approval comes not from authenticity, but from performance. You adapt, you mold, you rehearse, and slowly, the performance becomes the person. You wear the mask so long that you forget what your real face even looks like. Jung called this a crisis of the soul. He warned that when we build our identity around who we're supposed to be, we estrange ourselves from who we actually are. This is not just emotional fatigue. It is spiritual disconnection, because the greatest betrayal is not being misunderstood by others. It is becoming a stranger to yourself, and you will never feel truly alive as long as you're living someone else's story. Who did you have to become in order to be loved? That's the real question, because long before you knew the words for identity or authenticity, you learned that certain parts of you were welcome and others were not. So piece by piece, you constructed a mask. You smiled when you were confused. You stayed quiet when you were angry. You helped when you were hurting. And slowly, without even noticing, you stopped being someone and started becoming something acceptable. Jung called this mask the persona. It is not inherently false, but it is incomplete. The persona is the version of you built for survival. It's how you navigate school, family, society. It's the agreeable laugh, the polite nod, the harmless small talk. It protects you, but it also hides you. Because the longer you live in that role, the more distant your inner self becomes. And the tragedy is that most people never notice the trade. They just wake up one day feeling hollow, not realizing they've mistaken applause for intimacy and validation for connection. The real danger isn't the mask itself. It's believing the mask is you. Because when the applause fades, when no one is watching, when silence enters the room, you feel the ache, the pull of something deeper, the whisper of a self that remembers who you were before you became likable. But years of performance do not vanish easily. They cling. They whisper lies, that you're only lovable when useful, that you're only safe when silent, that if you were your full self, you'd be too much. This is not truth. This is programming. And unlearning it is the beginning of coming home. Who told you that anger was ugly, that jealousy was shameful, that desire made you dangerous? The parts of you that were silenced didn't vanish. They were buried, and what is buried doesn't die. It waits. This is the shadow, Jung said. Not a monster lurking in the dark, but the parts of your psyche you were taught to disown. The messier truths, the unacceptable emotions, the versions of you that didn't fit the narrative of good. The problem is not that the shadow exists. The problem is that you've been trained to fear it, to call it sin, to moralize your humanity into two categories, light and dark. But repression doesn't create goodness. It creates distortion. What you refuse to look at doesn't become harmless. It becomes unconscious. It leaks out in sarcasm, in passive aggression, in relationships where you give more than you should, and explode when you can no longer pretend it's fine. You call it burnout, but it's a reckoning. The shadow does not stay buried forever. It erupts. You are not meant to amputate half your psyche to be seen as worthy. You are meant to integrate it, because what you repress owns you, but what you reclaim empowers you. Your anger, when acknowledged, becomes clarity. Your envy becomes direction. Your fear becomes awareness. The shadow is not the villain of your story. It is the exiled warrior waiting to return, not to destroy, but to protect, not to dominate, but to complete. To fear your shadow is to fear your wholeness, and until you welcome it home, you will keep leaking power in the name of being good. You did everything right. You followed the map. You chased the milestones. You hit the deadlines. You smiled for the photos, and yet something feels off. The applause sounds hollow. The achievements don't land. There's a silence after every goal that echoes louder than the praise. You tell yourself to be grateful, to be content. But there's a quiet ache behind your accomplishments, a subtle, persistent hum of emptiness. This is the truth no one warns you about. Success can feel like failure when the soul is unfed. You've been living on external metrics, titles, numbers, approval, while your inner world withers. Jung said the soul doesn't care about resume lines. It craves meaning, not just comfort, not just stability, meaning. And meaning doesn't come from being impressive. It comes from being whole. And you can't be whole if you're just a persona in a suit, performing the version of yourself the world rewards. You are not broken. You are not ungrateful. You are simply awakening. The ache is not weakness. It's the beginning of truth. It is your psyche pulling at the mask you've worn too long. It is your deeper self refusing to be quiet any longer. And you can't numb it with productivity. You can't outrun it with promotions. You can't soothe it with likes. Because this ache is sacred. It is the inner scream that modern life cannot soothe. And the longer you ignore it, the louder it becomes. Not to destroy you, but to wake you up. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when you begin to feel the pull, a strange kind of yearning, not for more success, not for more recognition, but for something you can't quite name. A hunger that success never fed, a homesickness that no place can resolve. You try to explain it, but the words never quite land, and that's because it's not a craving for something new. It's the echo of something ancient, your own soul calling you home. Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey of becoming, not someone new but someone whole. It's not about chasing perfection. It's not about becoming the ideal version of yourself. It's about reclaiming the parts you buried to survive, the boldness you silenced, the rage you shamed, the grief you dismissed. Individuation is not a path toward becoming better. It is the path of becoming real, and it's never loud. It begins as a whisper, the quiet realization that what you've called normal was just numb. You've spent so long becoming who they needed, you've forgotten who you were before the needing began. But your truest self isn't gone. It's buried, under performance, under fear, under years of saying yes when your soul begged for no. And now, something inside you is stirring, not to destroy the life you've built, but to rebuild it around something truer, something freer, something that no longer trades your authenticity for approval. The real you has waited patiently, and it's done waiting. You like to believe you are entirely free, that your choices are yours alone, that your personality is self-made. But Jung warned, beneath your individuality lies something older, something deeper. Archetypes, ancient patterns, primordial stories that have shaped the human psyche since the beginning of time. You are not just you. You are the echo of a myth that has been told for thousands of years. There is the hero, the one who must leave safety, face chaos, and return transformed. The caregiver who gives endlessly, hoping love will be earned through sacrifice. The orphan, abandoned, watchful, waiting to be rescued but too afraid to trust. The rebel who burns the rules but sometimes forgets to build. These are not just characters in stories. They are characters in you. You've played them without realizing. You've repeated their patterns without question. And until you see them, they will continue to move you like a puppet on invisible strings. This isn't fate, it's programming, and awareness is your only exit, because once you see the archetype, you're no longer possessed by it. You begin to write your own lines instead of reciting someone else's script. You start asking, is this really who I am, or who I was trained to be? You stop blindly identifying with your patterns and start becoming the one who observes them. That moment, the shift from actor to author, is the birth of true power. Not because the archetypes disappear, but because they finally answer to you. You can delay the journey inward, but you cannot outrun the consequences. When you deny your soul long enough, your body begins to protest. It starts quietly, a weight in your chest, a fatigue that sleep can't touch. Then come the dreams that haunt, the relationships that collapse, the career that no longer makes sense. Jung didn't say the unlived life vanishes. He said it becomes illness. It becomes sabotage. It becomes suffering that has no name, but cannot be ignored. Depression is not always a disorder. Sometimes it is a message, a psychic rebellion against a life that no longer fits. Burnout is not just exhaustion. It is the mind revolting against a performance it can no longer sustain. When you betray your inner truth, you don't just lose peace. You lose alignment. And nothing in your outer world, no amount of success, praise, or productivity, can compensate for the ache of living as someone you're not. Individuation is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Without it, your life becomes hollow repetition. You chase goals that leave you empty. You play roles that drain you. You confuse safety with purpose. But the psyche is not fooled. It keeps score. It keeps speaking. And if you refuse to listen with your awareness, it will speak through your body, through illness, through chaos, through breakdown. The path to wholeness begins not with fixing the symptoms, but with asking the question, whose life am I living, and what part of me have I silenced to maintain it? There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, when something inside you quietly asks, what am I actually doing? The job you once wanted now feels empty. The relationship you stayed in starts to feel like self-abandonment. The life you built begins to feel like a mask that's grown too tight. This is not failure. This is awareness. It's the first fracture in the performance, the first glimpse behind the curtain. And though it may feel like confusion, it's actually clarity finally breaking through. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Awareness interrupts that fate. It catches the story mid-script and questions the narrator. You begin to see your patterns, not as personality, but as programming. You start to witness your own reactivity, your compulsive striving, your reflexive need to prove something. And in that witnessing, the unconscious, stops being a saboteur. It becomes a mirror, one that shows you not who you should be, but who you really are beneath the noise. This is the turning point, where you stop chasing more money, more praise, more distractions, and instead you start seeking what is true. Not what is impressive, not what is safe, but what is yours. The truth isn't always comfortable, but it is always clean. And once you touch it, even for a second, the taste of performative living becomes unbearable. Awareness doesn't just wake you up. It ruins your ability to go back to sleep. At some point, you stop asking, "Who should I be?" and start asking, "Who am I without the performance?" That's the moment the mask begins to slip. Not because someone rips it off, but because you no longer need it. You realize the identity you've been protecting isn't even yours. It was built out of survival, constructed to earn love, to avoid punishment, to belong. But now, you're ready for something more sacred than belonging. You are ready for congruence. You were not born to be digestible. You are not meant to contort yourself to fit into every room. Jung taught that the true self isn't found, it is remembered, and remembering requires subtraction. You peel away the false agreements, the roles you never consented to, the ideals you inherited but never examined. And in that quiet peeling, a deeper self begins to emerge. Not the curated one, not the perfect one, the real one, messy, powerful, whole. To become the author of your life, you must stop negotiating your identity with people who only love your performance. You must stop watering down your truth so others can swallow it more easily. Because wholeness is not earned through applause. It is claimed through alignment. And when your outer world finally reflects your inner truth, peace is no longer conditional. It becomes your baseline, your compass, your home. What if freedom wasn't fire and fury, but silence? Not emptiness, but presence. The kind of presence that doesn't need to impress, convince, or perform. That's the revolution. Quiet, unannounced. No applause, no audience. Just the simple, radical act of showing up as yourself. No longer adjusting your tone to match the room. No longer rehearsing lines that don't belong to your story. You stop performing, and for the first time, you begin living. This is not the high of escape, or the thrill of rebellion. This is something slower, stronger, grounded. Real freedom is not about floating above life. It's about rooting into it. It's walking through the world without flinching. It's letting your no be final and your yes be true. It's standing in discomfort without reaching for the mask. It's choosing solitude over betrayal, silence over noise, alignment over applause. Carl Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and you are no longer on the sidelines of your own life. You are the center, the witness, the voice. You don't need to be more. You need only to be you, not the idea of you, not the version the world rewards, but the one you buried, the one you're reclaiming, quietly, powerfully, permanently. And remember, the next video picks up where we left off here. Awakening builds upon each video. See you in the next one.